Hello there, and welcome back to Sleepy Wilds. Tonight, we're settling in with the story of a voice that helped define an entire genre of music, a performer whose wild stage presence often overshadowed the quieter, more complicated man behind it. His journey took him from a modest English childhood to the very heights of rock stardom, through struggle, reinvention, and an enduring, decades-long connection with his audience. So let yourself get comfortable, dim the lights, and let your eyes grow heavy whenever they're ready to. There's no need to remember every detail. Just let the story carry you gently toward sleep. This is the story of Ozzy Osbourne. In the industrial city of Birmingham, England, in December of 1948, a boy was born into a working-class family who would one day become known around the world simply by his surname. His name was John Michael Osbourne, though everyone who knew him would eventually call him Ozzy, a nickname from his school days that stuck with him for the rest of his life. He grew up in Aston, a modest neighborhood surrounded by factories and the constant hum of industrial England, one of 6 children in a family that worked hard simply to get by. His father worked night shifts at a factory, and his mother worked in another, and young Ozzy spent much of his childhood navigating a home life that was loving but often strained by financial hardship. School proved difficult for him in ways that weren't well understood at the time, and he struggled academically, eventually leaving education behind at just 15 years old. He drifted through a series of factory jobs, work that felt increasingly at odds with something restless stirring inside him, a feeling he couldn't yet name. It was music that first gave shape to this restlessness, particularly a record by the Beatles that captured his imagination completely, and slowly, quietly, an idea began forming in him that perhaps his own voice, untrained as it was, might carry him somewhere entirely different from the factory floors around him. He briefly found himself in trouble with the law during these uncertain teenage years, a stint that resulted in a short jail sentence for a minor offense, an experience that shook him and pushed him to reconsider the direction his life was heading. Music, increasingly, felt like the only real path forward that made any sense to him. Around Birmingham, he began meeting other young musicians drawn to the same blues and rock records that had captured his own imagination, gathering in small rehearsal spaces, trading ideas, slowly discovering that his untrained but distinctive voice carried something raw and compelling that audiences responded to immediately, even in those earliest, roughest performances. In Birmingham's tight-knit music scene, Ozzy crossed paths with a guitarist named Tony Iommi, whose own life had been shaped by a workplace accident that damaged his fingers, forcing him to adapt his playing style in ways that would eventually produce a heavier, darker guitar tone unlike anything else being played at the time. Together with bassist Geezer Butler and drummer Bill Ward, the 4 young musicians began playing together, initially performing under a different name before eventually settling on something that better captured the darker, heavier sound they were developing, one inspired partly by a horror film playing at a cinema across the street from their rehearsal space. This new sound, slow, heavy, and steeped in an atmosphere of unease, felt like nothing else on the music scene at the time. Where other bands of the era leaned toward psychedelic optimism, these 4 musicians from industrial Birmingham were creating something altogether different, drawing on the bleak, grinding reality of their own working-class upbringing. Their first self-titled record, released in early 1970, introduced this unusual, atmospheric sound to the world, and though critics were initially uncertain what to make of it, audiences responded immediately, drawn to something raw and honest that felt entirely unlike anything else available at the time. The album's opening track set an unmistakable tone, built around a slow, ominous riff that seemed to conjure genuine dread, Ozzy's voice floating above it with an eerie, almost pleading quality that many listeners found strangely captivating. Word spread quickly through England's music circles about this unusual new band from Birmingham. Later that same year, their second record arrived, cementing their reputation and producing what would become one of their most enduring songs, a track built around a simple, driving riff that Tony had reportedly written almost by accident during a rehearsal, yet one that would go on to define an entire subgenre of music still being explored by countless bands decades later. Through the early 1970s, the band's popularity grew steadily across both England and the United States, their heavy, atmospheric sound finding a devoted audience among listeners who felt increasingly disconnected from the more polished mainstream music of the era. Ozzy's distinctive voice, wailing and unpolished, became instantly recognizable on radio stations across the country. Success brought its own complications, however, and the pressures of constant touring, combined with the excesses common to rock stardom during this period, began to take a toll on the young singer. He found himself increasingly reliant on substances to manage the exhausting demands of life on the road, a pattern that would follow him, on and off, for much of his career. Despite these personal struggles, the band continued producing influential records throughout the decade, each one expanding on the atmospheric, heavy sound they'd pioneered, building a devoted following that stretched across generations of listeners who would go on to call themselves fans for the rest of their lives. By the middle of the decade, tensions within the band had begun quietly building, disagreements over musical direction, the pressures of fame, and Ozzy's ongoing struggles combining to create friction that would eventually reshape the group's future in ways none of them could have fully anticipated. Even amid these growing tensions, the band continued delivering records that fans embraced deeply, each release carrying forward the atmospheric heaviness that had first defined their sound years earlier, while subtly evolving alongside the changing musical landscape of the decade. Their live performances remained legendary, drawing enormous crowds across both England and America. Ozzy later reflected that these years felt like a strange blend of genuine artistic fulfillment and mounting personal chaos, the exhilaration of performing for adoring crowds night after night colliding uncomfortably with a growing sense that something within the band's internal dynamic was gradually coming apart. In 1979, after a decade of remarkable success and mounting internal strain, Ozzy departed from the band he had helped found, a difficult and painful separation for everyone involved. For a period afterward, he found himself uncertain about his future, unsure whether his career in music had effectively come to an end. It was during this uncertain period that he met Sharon Arden, whose father managed the band Ozzy had just left. Sharon would become not only his wife but also his manager, and her belief in his talent, combined with her considerable business acumen, helped guide him toward an entirely new chapter of his career that few could have predicted at the time. Sharon encouraged Ozzy to form a new band and pursue a solo career, and in 1980, he released his debut solo record, featuring a young, remarkably talented guitarist named Randy Rhoads. The album proved an immediate success, introducing Ozzy to an entirely new generation of fans while retaining the loyalty of those who had followed him since his earlier band. This period marked a genuine reinvention for Ozzy, proving that his distinctive voice and stage presence could thrive independently, carrying forward the heavy, atmospheric sound he'd helped pioneer while forging an entirely new creative identity for himself as a solo artist. Randy Rhoads brought a level of musical sophistication that complemented Ozzy's raw vocal style beautifully, blending classical guitar training with hard rock energy in a way that critics and fans alike found genuinely exciting. Their creative partnership, though it would prove tragically brief, produced some of the most enduring songs of Ozzy's entire career. Sharon's steady guidance during this period extended well beyond simple career management, offering Ozzy genuine emotional stability during a time when his personal struggles continued testing him. Their partnership, both personal and professional, would become one of the defining relationships of his entire life, weathering decades of challenges still ahead of them. 1981 brought Ozzy's second solo record, another significant success that further cemented his reputation as a formidable solo artist entirely capable of standing apart from his earlier band. Randy Rhoads' guitar work continued earning widespread acclaim, and the partnership between the two musicians seemed poised for many more years of creative collaboration. Tragedy struck suddenly in March of 1982, when Randy died in a small plane accident during a break in the band's touring schedule. The loss devastated Ozzy profoundly, both personally and professionally, marking one of the most difficult periods of his entire life, a grief that he would carry with him in various forms for decades afterward. Despite this profound loss, Ozzy made the difficult decision to continue his career, understanding that stopping entirely would not honor the work he and Randy had built together. He brought in new musicians and continued touring, carrying forward the music they had created while finding his own way through genuine, overwhelming grief. This period tested Ozzy in ways few could fully understand, forcing him to navigate both public performance and private mourning simultaneously, a difficult balance that would ultimately reveal a resilience that had, until this point, remained largely hidden beneath his wilder public persona. Those close to him during this period often described watching him summon genuine courage each night to step back onto the stage, channeling profound grief into performances that fans found unexpectedly moving, even without fully understanding the depth of what he was privately carrying. Sharon remained a steady, grounding presence throughout this difficult stretch, helping Ozzy navigate both the practical demands of continuing his career and the deeply personal process of grieving someone who had become far more than simply a musical collaborator, a genuine friend whose loss left a lasting mark on Ozzy's life and music alike. Throughout the remainder of the 1980s, Ozzy continued building his solo career, releasing a steady stream of records that, while never quite recapturing the specific magic of his partnership with Randy Rhoads, still found devoted audiences and produced several enduring hits that remained staples of rock radio for decades afterward. His public persona during this period grew increasingly larger than life, a wild, theatrical figure whose stage antics sometimes overshadowed the genuine musical craftsmanship underlying his work. Headlines occasionally focused more on sensational stories than on the actual quality of his music, a dynamic that Ozzy himself often found both amusing and frustrating in equal measure. Behind this public persona, however, Ozzy continued quietly battling the substance struggles that had followed him since his earliest days of fame, difficulties that occasionally interrupted his career and strained his personal relationships, even as his professional success continued largely unabated. Sharon remained a constant presence through these turbulent years, managing his career with remarkable skill while also raising their growing family, a responsibility that required considerable strength given the unpredictable nature of life alongside someone navigating such public and private challenges simultaneously. Despite the difficulties of this period, Ozzy's musical output remained genuinely creative, his records continuing to explore new sonic territory while retaining the core elements that had first made his voice so recognizable. Fans stayed remarkably loyal throughout, drawn as much to his authenticity as to any particular song or record. Touring during these years brought its own particular chaos, tour buses and hotel rooms filled with stories that would later become the stuff of rock legend, though beneath the wild reputation, Ozzy continued showing up night after night, delivering performances that audiences found genuinely captivating regardless of whatever turmoil surrounded them. The 1990s brought a significant turning point in Ozzy's ongoing battle with substance struggles, as he made a determined, lasting commitment to sobriety that would fundamentally reshape the remainder of his life and career. This decision, difficult as it was, allowed him to approach both his music and his family life with a clarity he'd rarely experienced during his earlier years of fame. This same decade saw the launch of Ozzfest, a touring festival that Sharon helped create, showcasing emerging heavy metal and hard rock bands alongside Ozzy's own performances. The festival became enormously influential, helping launch the careers of numerous bands while cementing Ozzy's status as a genuine elder statesman of the genre he'd helped pioneer decades earlier. Ozzfest represented something meaningful beyond its commercial success, a way for Ozzy to give back to the musical community that had shaped his own career, offering emerging artists a platform much like the one that had once helped launch his own unlikely journey from Birmingham's factory floors to international stardom. This period of renewed stability and purpose allowed Ozzy to reconnect more fully with his family, an opportunity he later described as one of the most meaningful developments of his entire adult life, healing relationships that had been strained during his earlier, more turbulent years. His children, growing up alongside this newfound stability, often spoke warmly in later years about watching their father gradually settle into a calmer, more present version of himself, still recognizably Ozzy, still carrying that same wild creative energy, but grounded now in genuine commitment to the people around him. This transformation didn't happen overnight, and Ozzy himself was often candid about the ongoing effort required to maintain his sobriety, describing it as a continuous, daily choice rather than a problem solved once and forgotten. This honesty about his own struggles became, in its own way, another form of connection with fans who recognized similar battles in their own lives. Let us pause here for a moment, resting quietly in this reflective space partway through Ozzy's remarkable story. Picture a young boy in industrial Birmingham, restless and uncertain, discovering in music an unexpected path away from factory work and towards something entirely unforeseen. Picture, too, those early rehearsals with Tony, Geezer, and Bill, for young musicians from working-class Birmingham, creating an entirely new sound together, heavy and atmospheric, unlike anything the music world had heard before. There's something deeply moving in imagining that unlikely beginning, for ordinary young men shaping an entire genre almost by accident. Picture the difficult years too, loss and struggle woven alongside genuine triumph, a life that held both remarkable highs and profound challenges in close, complicated proximity. This kind of honest complexity, held gently rather than judged, offers its own quiet comfort tonight. We will continue shortly, following the remaining chapters of this remarkable journey, but for now, let yourself rest in this reflective stillness, this reminder that even the wildest, most public lives carry within them quieter, more human stories worth honoring. Let your breathing settle into something slow and even, unhurried, matching the quiet stillness of this pause between chapters. There's nothing left to hold on to in this moment, only this soft, settled quiet stretching gently around you. Somewhere far off, imagine a warm English evening settling over old Birmingham streets, factory lights dimming one by one, patient and quiet, the same industrial landscape that once shaped an unlikely young voice destined for something far larger than anyone around him could have imagined. The early 2000s brought Ozzy an entirely unexpected new form of fame when he and his family agreed to be filmed for a television series documenting their everyday domestic life. The show became an immediate cultural phenomenon, introducing audiences to a surprisingly warm, funny, and often chaotic family dynamic that contrasted sharply with Ozzy's wilder public reputation. Viewers responded enthusiastically to seeing this softer, more relatable side of Ozzy, a devoted father genuinely befuddled by everyday household technology, deeply affectionate toward his children, and refreshingly honest about the ongoing challenges of maintaining sobriety and stability within his unusual family life. This new visibility introduced Ozzy to an entirely new generation of fans who might never have otherwise encountered his music, broadening his cultural relevance well beyond the heavy metal community that had followed him for decades. He became, somewhat unexpectedly, a beloved figure across a much wider mainstream audience. Sharon and their children became household names in their own right through this program, and the show offered audiences a genuinely candid look at the complicated, sometimes messy reality of a family navigating fame, addiction recovery, and ordinary domestic life all at once, presented with surprising warmth and humor throughout. Critics and audiences alike often noted how disarming it was to watch someone once considered rock's most notorious wild man fumble good-naturedly with a television remote or express genuine bewilderment at his own children's teenage antics, a humanizing portrait that reshaped public perception of him considerably. This chapter of his career, while unexpected, felt in many ways like a natural continuation of the same honesty that had always characterized Ozzy's public persona, whether performing on stage or simply being himself at home, unwilling or perhaps unable to hide the more vulnerable, human aspects of his complicated life. As the years continued forward, Ozzy faced increasingly significant health challenges, including a diagnosis that would require him to manage a serious neurological condition alongside the effects of previous injuries sustained over decades of performing. He approached these difficulties with characteristic honesty, speaking openly with fans about his struggles rather than hiding them from public view. Despite these considerable health challenges, Ozzy continued making music and performing whenever he was able, his determination to keep creating remaining a defining feature of his character right through his final years. Fans responded with deep affection and support, grateful for decades of music and equally moved by his continued honesty about aging and illness. His reunion performances with his original bandmates during these later years carried particular emotional weight, both for Ozzy and for longtime fans who had followed the band's entire remarkable journey since those early Birmingham days, a full-circle moment that honored the friendship and creative partnership that had started it all decades earlier. Tonight's story has followed Ozzy from a restless boy in industrial Birmingham to one of music's most recognizable and beloved voices, a journey marked by genuine struggle, remarkable resilience, and an enduring connection with audiences that spanned more than 5 decades of an extraordinary life. There's a particular comfort in stories like this one, reminders that a meaningful life rarely follows a straight, simple path, that genuine struggle and genuine triumph can exist side by side, each shaping the other in ways that ultimately reveal a person's truest character. As you drift now toward your own rest tonight, let the same resilient, unhurried spirit that carried Ozzy through so many chapters of his remarkable life settle gently over you too, patient and warm, exactly as it should. Beyond his own recorded music, Ozzy's influence on the broader landscape of rock and metal proved immeasurable, countless bands across the decades citing him and his original band as foundational to their own musical development. His distinctive vocal style, once considered unconventional, became a template that shaped how an entire genre approached vocal performance. Musicians who grew up idolizing him often described a particular moment of hearing his voice for the first time, something raw and unpolished that felt more honest than the more technically perfect vocalists dominating other genres of the era. This rawness became, paradoxically, one of his most influential qualities, proof that genuine emotional connection often mattered more than technical perfection. Younger artists across multiple generations continued citing him as inspiration well into his later career, a testament to how thoroughly his early work had embedded itself into the broader cultural understanding of what heavy music could sound like and, perhaps more importantly, what it could genuinely express emotionally. This lasting influence extended well beyond music itself, shaping fashion, aesthetic sensibilities, and even broader cultural attitudes toward authenticity and vulnerability in public performance, a legacy that continued growing even as the specific musical trends around him shifted and evolved across the decades. Music historians studying the broader evolution of rock often point to Ozzy's early recordings as a genuine turning point, the moment when heavier, darker musical themes found a legitimate, lasting place within popular culture rather than remaining a fringe curiosity. This shift opened doors for countless artists who followed in his footsteps. His willingness to explore darker, heavier themes without ever losing an underlying sense of genuine emotional vulnerability became a defining template that influenced not just musicians, but an entire cultural approach to expressing difficult emotions honestly through art, a contribution whose full scope became clearer only with the benefit of decades of hindsight. Ozzy's relationship with his original bandmates evolved considerably over the decades following his initial departure from the group, moving through periods of estrangement toward eventual reconciliation and genuine friendship rediscovered later in life. This healing process mirrored, in many ways, his broader personal journey toward greater emotional honesty and stability. Occasional reunion tours and recordings throughout the years gave fans meaningful opportunities to witness these four original musicians performing together again, moments that carried genuine emotional weight given everything they had collectively experienced since those early Birmingham rehearsals decades earlier. These reunions were never simply nostalgic exercises, but genuine expressions of a friendship that had weathered considerable strain yet ultimately endured, proof that the creative bond formed in their youth had never entirely disappeared, even during the years when personal and professional tensions had kept them apart. Fans who witnessed these reunion performances often described an almost tangible sense of history in the room, for musicians who had fundamentally shaped an entire genre of music standing together again, decades after their unlikely beginning in a working-class corner of industrial England. Ozzy himself often reflected on these reunions with visible emotion, acknowledging how much these relationships had come to mean to him over the years, friendships that had survived considerable strain precisely because of the genuine bond forged during those earliest, most formative years of their shared musical journey. These moments of reconciliation offered fans a meaningful glimpse into how Ozzy had grown across the decades, increasingly valuing these long-standing relationships and finding genuine peace in reconnecting with the people who had been there from the very beginning of his remarkable, unlikely career. Let us pause once more here, resting quietly in this reflective space partway through tonight's story. Picture those reunion moments, for musicians who had known each other since youth, standing together again on stage, carrying decades of shared history, friendship, and hard-won reconciliation into every note they played together. Picture, too, the quieter moments away from the stage, family gatherings, ordinary afternoons, a life gradually finding greater balance and peace after so many turbulent years. There's something deeply comforting in imagining this kind of hard-earned stability, arriving not easily, but genuinely, after decades of honest effort and personal growth. Picture the countless fans across the world who found something meaningful in this journey, comfort in seeing someone navigate genuine struggle honestly, without pretense, finding his way toward greater peace while never entirely abandoning the wild, creative spirit that had first drawn people to him. We will continue shortly toward the final chapters of tonight's story, but for now, let this reflective stillness settle gently over you, patient and warm, this reminder that growth and healing remain possible at any stage of a genuinely lived life. Let your breathing slow further, unhurried and even, matching this same gentle pause between chapters. There's nothing left to hold on to right now, only this soft, settled quiet stretching gently around you, patient and complete. Somewhere far off, imagine a quiet English countryside evening settling in, warm light glowing softly from farmhouse windows, patient and welcoming, a peaceful contrast to decades once spent beneath blazing stage lights and roaring crowds. Ozzy's relationship with his fans developed into something genuinely unique over the decades, built on a foundation of mutual honesty rarely seen between performers and their audiences. He never presented himself as anything other than genuinely human, flaws and all, an approach that fostered deep loyalty among generations of listeners who felt they truly knew him. Concert audiences often described a particular warmth in his live performances, moments where he would pause to genuinely connect with the crowd, expressing sincere gratitude for their continued support across decades of shared musical history. This authenticity became as central to his appeal as his actual musical output. Fan conventions and meet and greets throughout the years revealed a performer genuinely moved by the loyalty of his audience, often recalling specific stories shared with him by longtime fans about how his music had helped them through difficult periods in their own lives, connections that clearly meant a great deal to him personally. This genuine reciprocal relationship between Ozzy and his audience represented something increasingly rare within the broader music industry, a performer whose success never fully separated him from the very real, human connections that had sustained his remarkable career across more than 5 decades. Longtime fans often described feeling a genuine sense of personal investment in Ozzy's own journey, celebrating his sobriety milestones, worrying alongside him through health struggles, and finding real comfort in his continued honesty about the ongoing challenges of aging and illness rather than any polished, distant celebrity image. This mutual devotion between artist and audience grew, if anything, stronger during his final years, fans rallying with genuine affection around someone who had given them decades of music while never pretending his own life had been anything other than complicated, difficult, and ultimately, deeply human. Throughout his later career, Ozzy continued exploring new musical territory, collaborating with a wide range of artists across different genres who each brought fresh perspective to his distinctive voice. These collaborations revealed a genuine musical curiosity that persisted even after decades of established success within his own particular style. Younger artists who worked alongside him during these years often described the experience as genuinely inspiring, finding him remarkably open to experimentation despite his legendary status, still approaching each new project with authentic creative enthusiasm rather than simply coasting on past achievements. This continued willingness to evolve and collaborate helped keep Ozzy musically relevant well into his 70s, introducing his distinctive voice to entirely new audiences who might never have otherwise encountered his earlier catalog, a testament to his enduring adaptability as an artist across changing musical eras. His later recordings often carried a particular emotional depth, informed by decades of lived experience, struggle, and hard-won wisdom, giving these final chapters of his musical career a genuine gravity that resonated deeply with longtime fans who had grown alongside him through every stage of his remarkable journey. Critics reviewing these later albums often noted a newfound vulnerability in his songwriting, lyrics that grappled openly with mortality, gratitude, and reflection in ways that felt earned rather than performative, the natural culmination of a lifetime spent processing difficult experiences through music. This willingness to address aging and mortality so directly in his later work offered listeners something genuinely valuable: permission to approach these same difficult subjects in their own lives with similar honesty, another quiet gift among the many Ozzy had already given his audience across more than 5 decades of shared musical history. Family remained the steadiest constant throughout Ozzy's remarkable and often turbulent life, his relationship with Sharon evolving over decades into something that weathered enormous challenges while remaining fundamentally rooted in genuine partnership and mutual devotion. Their marriage became, in its own way, as much a part of his public story as his music itself. His children, growing into adulthood alongside their father's continued fame, developed their own careers and public identities while maintaining close relationships with both parents. Ozzy often spoke with genuine pride about watching his children forge their own paths, understanding perhaps better than most the particular challenges of growing up in the public eye. Grandchildren eventually entered this picture too, bringing Ozzy a different kind of joy in his later years, one he often described with genuine warmth in interviews, finding particular delight in this quieter, more domestic role after decades spent primarily as a public performer and rock icon. This family constant, imperfect but genuine, provided Ozzy with an anchor throughout even his most difficult years, a reminder that beneath the wild public persona existed simply a man who deeply valued the people closest to him, imperfectly but authentically, across every stage of his complicated, remarkable life. Sharon often spoke about their marriage with candid honesty, acknowledging the considerable challenges they had navigated together while emphasizing the genuine love that had ultimately carried them through decades of both public scrutiny and private struggle. Their partnership became, for many observers, a compelling example of commitment sustained through real difficulty. Ozzy himself frequently credited Sharon as the single most important stabilizing force in his entire life, someone whose belief in him had helped carry him through periods when he might otherwise have lost his way entirely, a debt of gratitude he expressed openly and often throughout his final decades. Let us rest here once more, in this quiet, reflective pause before we near tonight's closing chapters. Picture Ozzy surrounded by family in his later years, grandchildren nearby, decades of complicated history settled now into something resembling genuine peace, hard-won through years of honest effort and continued growth. Picture, too, the countless stages he stood on across 5 decades, each performance carrying forward that same distinctive voice that had first emerged from a restless Birmingham teenager searching for something beyond factory work and ordinary expectation. Picture the fans across generations who found genuine comfort and connection in his music and his honesty, a relationship built not on distant celebrity but on something far more genuine, mutual recognition of shared human struggle and resilience carried across decades of shared musical history. We will continue shortly toward the final reflections of tonight's story, but for now, let this quiet, grateful stillness settle gently over you, patient and warm, this reminder that even the most complicated lives can find their way, eventually, toward genuine peace. Let your breath slow further, gentle and unhurried, matching this same soft, reflective pause. There's nothing left to hold on to right now, only this settled quiet, patient and complete, stretching gently around you. Somewhere far off, imagine warm English countryside light fading slowly into evening, patient and golden, settling over quiet fields exactly as it always has, welcoming a long, remarkable journey gently toward its own peaceful, well-earned rest. Ozzy's contribution to charitable causes throughout his life reflected a genuine desire to give back, particularly toward organizations supporting addiction recovery and mental health awareness, drawing on his own extensive personal experience to help others facing similar struggles find their own path toward healing. He spoke often and candidly about mental health challenges alongside his substance struggles, helping normalize conversations around these difficult topics within an industry and culture that had historically treated such subjects with considerable stigma and silence. This openness became another meaningful part of his broader legacy. Organizations supporting these causes often credited Ozzy's public candor with helping reduce shame around seeking help for both addiction and mental health struggles, his willingness to discuss his own difficulties honestly providing genuine comfort and validation for countless individuals facing similar private battles. This aspect of his legacy, quieter than his musical achievements yet arguably just as meaningful, revealed a man who understood deeply the value of honest vulnerability, using his considerable platform not merely for entertainment, but as a genuine tool for helping others navigate their own difficult journeys. Fans who struggled with similar addiction or mental health challenges often described feeling genuinely less alone knowing that someone so publicly successful had faced comparable difficulties, finding real encouragement in his continued honesty about the ongoing, daily nature of maintaining recovery rather than treating it as a problem solved once and forgotten. This willingness to remain openly vulnerable, even at the height of his fame, offered a quiet but genuinely important contribution to broader public conversations around addiction and mental health, one that extended his influence well beyond the boundaries of music into something more deeply personal and lasting for countless individuals. As Ozzy's health challenges intensified in his final years, he approached each remaining performance and public appearance with a determination that deeply moved fans and fellow musicians alike. His continued commitment to his craft, even amid considerable physical difficulty, reflected the same resilient spirit that had carried him through every earlier chapter of his complicated life. Interviews from this period carried a particularly reflective, grateful quality, Ozzy looking back across his remarkable career with genuine appreciation for everything music had given him, the friendships, the family, the decades-long connection with fans who had supported him through every stage of his journey. He spoke openly about mortality during these final years, approaching the subject with characteristic honesty rather than avoidance, finding a kind of peace in acknowledging life's natural limits while expressing continued gratitude for the extraordinary journey he'd been fortunate enough to experience. This candor about aging and illness offered his audience one final, meaningful gift: permission to approach these universal human experiences with similar honesty and grace, a fitting continuation of the authentic vulnerability that had defined his entire public life since those earliest days in industrial Birmingham. Those closest to him during this period often described a man at genuine peace, surrounded by family, reflecting warmly on an extraordinary life lived fully despite considerable hardship, grateful rather than bitter, present rather than dwelling on regret. His final public appearances carried enormous emotional weight for longtime fans, each one understood as a precious opportunity to witness, one more time, the remarkable voice and spirit that had shaped so much of modern rock music across more than 5 decades of genuine artistic and personal evolution. As we near the close of this chapter of Ozzy's remarkable story, let us reflect on the sheer breadth of what he accomplished across more than 5 decades, from a restless boy in industrial Birmingham to one of the most recognizable and influential voices in modern music history, a journey shaped equally by genuine struggle and remarkable resilience. His legacy extends across countless dimensions: the pioneering musical sound he helped create, the honest vulnerability he brought to public discussions of addiction and mental health, and the genuine warmth and humor that endeared him to audiences far beyond the heavy metal community that first embraced him decades earlier. Beyond the music and public persona, his story offers something deeply human, a reminder that growth and healing remain possible throughout an entire lifetime, that genuine connection with others often matters more than any individual achievement, and that authenticity, however messy or complicated, tends to resonate more deeply than any polished, distant public image ever could. Tonight, as this chapter settles toward its close, carry with you the resilient, honest spirit that defined Ozzy's remarkable life, patient and grateful, exactly as he seemed to become across his final, reflective years. There's a particular comfort in stories like this one, quiet reminders that even the wildest, most publicly complicated lives can find their way toward genuine peace and connection, that struggle and triumph often walk hand in hand across a truly lived life. As you drift now toward your own rest tonight, let that same grateful, resilient spirit settle gently over you, patient and warm, one breath following naturally after the last, exactly as it should. Beyond his own considerable body of work, Ozzy's influence extended meaningfully into how the broader music industry approached artist reinvention, proving through his own career that genuine longevity often requires the courage to evolve rather than simply repeating past success indefinitely. His journey from founding member of an influential band to successful solo artist, and later to unexpected television personality, demonstrated a willingness to embrace change that many of his contemporaries found difficult to replicate. Each reinvention carried genuine risk, yet each ultimately expanded his reach and relevance rather than diminishing it. Industry observers often pointed to this adaptability as a key factor in his remarkable staying power across more than 5 decades of public life, a career that could easily have stalled after any single setback, yet consistently found new avenues for creative and commercial success instead. This willingness to evolve, while still remaining recognizably himself throughout every transformation, offered aspiring artists a valuable lesson about sustainable career longevity, proof that authentic reinvention, rather than desperate imitation of changing trends, tends to produce far more meaningful and lasting results. Business analysts studying the entertainment industry often cited Ozzy's career trajectory as a genuinely instructive case study, demonstrating how personal authenticity, even amid dramatic public reinvention, could sustain audience loyalty across generations far more effectively than any calculated marketing strategy alone. Fellow musicians who watched his career unfold across decades frequently expressed admiration for how naturally these transitions seemed to occur, never appearing forced or desperate, but rather like organic extensions of an artist continuing to follow his own genuine curiosity and creative instincts wherever they happen to lead him next. Ozzy's relationship with his hometown of Birmingham remained a meaningful constant throughout his life, the city's industrial character never far from how he understood his own origins and identity, regardless of how far his career eventually carried him from those early working-class streets. He spoke often and fondly about Birmingham in interviews, crediting the city's particular atmosphere, its factories, its weather, its working-class resilience, as foundational influences on the heavy, atmospheric sound he'd helped pioneer decades earlier. The city, in turn, embraced him as one of its most celebrated cultural exports. Birmingham eventually honored Ozzy and his former bandmates with various forms of civic recognition, acknowledging their profound influence on music history and their lasting connection to the city that had shaped their earliest creative instincts. These honors carried genuine emotional weight for Ozzy, a formal acknowledgement of roots he'd never forgotten. This enduring connection to his origins offered a grounding thread throughout his otherwise dramatically transformed life, a reminder that despite decades of international fame, he remained, at his core, a product of that particular industrial English city that had first shaped his restless creative spirit. Local residents in Birmingham often described genuine pride in claiming Ozzy as one of their own, appreciating how consistently he acknowledged his working-class roots even after achieving worldwide fame, never distancing himself from the community that had shaped his earliest years and creative instincts. This mutual affection between Ozzy and his hometown grew into something particularly meaningful during his final years, with the city organizing tributes that celebrated his profound contribution to music history, honoring both the man himself and the broader cultural legacy that had emerged from those unassuming Birmingham streets. Let us pause here once more, resting quietly in this reflective space near the story's later chapters. Picture Birmingham's industrial streets, the same landscape that once shaped a restless young boy's imagination, now proudly celebrating one of its most influential cultural exports, a connection that never faded despite decades of international fame. Picture, too, the countless reinventions across Ozzy's remarkable career, each one a genuine leap into uncertain territory, yet each ultimately revealing new dimensions of an artist unwilling to simply repeat past success indefinitely. There's something deeply inspiring in imagining this kind of sustained creative courage across an entire lifetime. Picture the fans across generations who found genuine comfort in watching someone navigate such dramatic life changes with authenticity intact, never losing the essential honesty that had first drawn people to him, regardless of which particular chapter of his career they happened to encounter. We will continue shortly toward the final reflections of tonight's long story, but for now, let this quiet appreciation for courage and authenticity settle gently over you, patient and warm, exactly as it should. Let your breathing slow further still, unhurried and even, matching this same gentle, reflective pause. There's nothing left to hold on to right now, only this soft, settled quiet stretching gently around you, patient and complete. Somewhere far off, imagine old Birmingham factory lights dimming slowly one by one against the evening sky, patient and quiet, the same industrial landscape that once shaped an unlikely young voice destined for something far larger than anyone around him could have imagined. The broader cultural impact of Ozzy's decades-long career extended well beyond music charts and record sales, shaping how mainstream audiences understood and eventually embraced an entire genre that had once existed largely at culture's margins. His unexpected mainstream television success helped bridge this gap in ways few could have predicted. Cultural commentators often noted how thoroughly Ozzy's public image evolved over the decades, from a figure viewed with genuine suspicion by mainstream culture during his earliest years, toward a beloved, almost grandfatherly presence embraced across generational and cultural lines by the later chapters of his remarkable career. This transformation reflected broader shifts in how society approached mental health, addiction, and personal authenticity more generally, with Ozzy's own willingness to discuss these topics openly helping normalize conversations that previous generations had largely kept hidden from public view entirely. His journey, in this sense, paralleled and perhaps even helped accelerate broader cultural conversations happening simultaneously across society, proof that a single public figure's genuine honesty could meaningfully contribute to larger shifts in collective understanding and empathy toward difficult, deeply human struggles. Sociologists studying celebrity culture have occasionally referenced Ozzy's remarkable public transformation as a genuinely interesting case study, illustrating how sustained authenticity over decades can gradually reshape public perception far more effectively than any single carefully managed publicity campaign ever could. This lasting cultural shift, subtle but genuinely significant, remains an underappreciated dimension of his broader legacy, a quiet reminder that consistent honesty over an entire lifetime can meaningfully influence not just individual careers, but the wider cultural conversation surrounding difficult, deeply human topics. As we move further into these final reflective chapters, it's worth considering the sheer scale of Ozzy's musical catalog, spanning both his work with his original band and his extensive solo career, a body of work that continues introducing new listeners to his distinctive voice even decades after many of these recordings first appeared. Streaming platforms in recent years have reported consistently strong listening numbers across his entire catalog, suggesting his music continues resonating deeply with both longtime fans revisiting familiar favorites and younger listeners discovering his work for the very first time through digital platforms his earliest audiences could never have imagined. This ongoing relevance speaks to something genuinely timeless about the music he helped create, built on raw emotional authenticity rather than any particular production trend or technical innovation that might otherwise have dated the recordings as musical fashions inevitably shifted across the decades. Music critics revisiting his catalog with fresh perspective often note how remarkably well these recordings have aged, their emotional honesty translating easily across generational lines in ways that more trend-dependent music from the same era frequently fails to achieve. Younger listeners encountering his music for the first time through digital platforms often express genuine surprise at how vital and relevant it still feels, discovering songs their parents or even grandparents once listened to and finding within them the same raw emotional resonance that had captivated audiences decades earlier. This continued discovery across generations ensures that Ozzy's musical legacy remains genuinely alive rather than simply preserved as historical artifact, his distinctive voice continuing to find new listeners who connect with it as authentically as those who first heard it upon its original release so many decades ago. Let us rest here once more, near the closing chapters of this long, reflective story. Picture the complete arc of Ozzy's remarkable journey, a restless boy from industrial Birmingham, a founding voice in an entirely new musical genre, a successful solo artist, a beloved television personality, and finally, a wise, grateful elder statesman reflecting honestly on an extraordinary life. Picture, too, the countless listeners across generations who found genuine comfort in his music and his honesty, connections built not on distant celebrity worship, but on authentic recognition of shared human struggle, resilience, and the messy, complicated process of genuine personal growth. Picture the family that remained his steadiest anchor throughout every chapter, Sharon's unwavering partnership, his children's continued closeness, grandchildren bringing fresh joy into his later years, each relationship a testament to the genuine love underlying his often turbulent public journey. We are nearing the close of this long story now, so let this complete, grateful picture settle gently over you, patient and warm, carrying you softly toward your own rest, exactly as Ozzy's own hard-won peace eventually settled over him. Let your breath continue slowing, gentle and unhurried, matching this same patient rhythm one final time. Nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to accomplish, only this soft, settled stillness stretching quietly around you. Somewhere far off, imagine one final warm light dimming slowly into peaceful dark, patient and complete, the way a long, remarkable life eventually settles gently into its own well-earned, peaceful rest. Ozzy's relationship with humor remained a defining, often underappreciated aspect of his character throughout his entire public life, a quick wit that frequently surfaced even amid discussions of genuinely difficult subjects. This ability to find lightness within complexity endeared him to audiences who appreciated his refusal to take himself too seriously. Interviews across his entire career reveal a consistent comedic sensibility, self-deprecating humor that acknowledged his own considerable flaws and mistakes without descending into genuine bitterness or self-pity. This particular quality became, in many ways, as central to his public appeal as his musical talent itself. His television appearances often highlighted this natural comedic timing, moments of genuine bewilderment or confusion presented with such disarming honesty that audiences found themselves laughing alongside him rather than at his expense, a subtle distinction that spoke to genuine affection between Ozzy and his audience. This capacity for humor, even during his most difficult periods, offered a valuable model for approaching life's genuine hardships, proof that finding lightness and laughter within difficult circumstances need not diminish the seriousness of genuine struggle, but can instead offer meaningful relief and connection along the way. Family members often describe genuine laughter as a constant presence throughout their household, even during the most challenging stretches of Ozzy's health struggles, his ability to find something amusing in nearly any situation, offering comfort and levity to those around him during otherwise difficult times. Fans consistently cited this warmth and humor as central to why they felt such genuine affection toward him, appreciating a public figure who never seemed to take his own considerable fame too seriously, remaining approachable and genuinely funny even at the height of his international stardom. As tonight's story approaches its final chapters, it's worth considering how Ozzy's remarkable journey ultimately reflects broader truths about resilience, reinvention, and the enduring power of genuine human connection sustained across an entire lifetime, regardless of whatever particular challenges that lifetime happened to present along the way. From industrial Birmingham to international stardom, through profound loss and genuine triumph, addiction and hard-won recovery, Ozzy's story offers a complete, honest portrait of a genuinely lived life, neither purely tragic nor simply triumphant, but authentically, messily human throughout every single chapter. This complexity, rather than diminishing his legacy, ultimately deepens it, offering audiences something far more valuable than simple celebrity worship, a genuine, relatable model for navigating life's inevitable difficulties with honesty, humor, and hard-won resilience sustained across decades of genuine effort. His musical contributions alone would have secured his lasting legacy, yet it's this fuller, more complicated human story, struggle alongside triumph, honesty alongside vulnerability, that ultimately makes his journey so genuinely meaningful to the countless fans who followed him across more than 5 decades. Biographers and cultural historians studying his life often emphasize this particular quality as central to understanding his lasting impact, a figure whose willingness to be genuinely, imperfectly human resonated more deeply with audiences than any carefully curated public image ever could have achieved. This authentic humanity, expressed consistently across 5 remarkable decades of public life, offers perhaps the truest measure of what made Ozzy Osbourne such a genuinely beloved figure, not merely a talented musician, but a fellow traveler through life's genuine complexities, honest about struggle and grateful for every triumph along the way. Let us pause one final time before this chapter closes, resting quietly in the complete, gentle weight of everything we've shared tonight. Picture once more that restless boy in industrial Birmingham, uncertain about his future, unaware of the remarkable journey still waiting patiently ahead of him. Picture the decades that followed, groundbreaking music, profound loss, hard-won recovery, unexpected reinvention, and finally, genuine peace found through family, honesty, and continued creative purpose. All of it woven together by that same authentic, resilient spirit running consistently through his entire remarkable life. Picture, finally, the music itself, still playing somewhere even now, in cars and homes and quiet evening moments around the world, carrying forward his distinctive voice to listeners who may never fully know his complicated story, yet feel something genuine and lasting in every note. This is the quiet, complete shape of a life fully lived, struggle and triumph woven together across 5 remarkable decades, carried forward now into whatever comes next through the music itself, still resonating, still comforting, still connecting people across generations. Let your breathing settle fully now into this same slow, patient rhythm. Nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to accomplish, only this soft, complete stillness gathering gently around you like a warm quilt on a quiet night. Somewhere far off, imagine one final warm light dimming slowly into peaceful dark, patient and unhurried, the way a long, well-loved life eventually settles into its own gentle, complete rest, exactly as it always was meant to. As this long, reflective story draws toward its close, what remains most striking about Ozzy Osbourne's remarkable life is its complete honesty, more than 5 decades of genuine struggle and equally genuine triumph, carried forward with a resilience that never lost its essential humanity or its distinctive creative voice. From industrial Birmingham to international stardom, his journey never lost its fundamentally human character, humble, honest, endlessly willing to acknowledge both hardship and gratitude in equal measure. This authenticity, sustained across an entire remarkable lifetime, offers a genuinely powerful example worth carrying forward. His music will continue reaching new listeners for generations to come, each recording carrying forward the same raw, honest emotional quality that first captivated audiences decades earlier, a reminder that genuine artistic expression, rooted in authentic human experience, tends to outlast any particular musical trend or era. As you drift now toward your own rest tonight, let that same resilient, grateful spirit carry you gently along, patient and warm, one breath following naturally after the last, exactly as it always should be, exactly as Ozzy himself eventually found his own way toward genuine peace. And so, gently, our story comes to its close for tonight. Ozzy Osbourne's remarkable journey, from restless Birmingham boy to one of music's most recognizable and beloved voices, carried both genuine struggle and genuine triumph across more than 5 decades, and tonight, that same honest, resilient spirit has hopefully carried you a little closer toward your own rest. Thank you for spending this time with us, for walking slowly through this remarkable life, from industrial England to stages around the entire world, and through every difficult, honest chapter in between. Wherever you are listening from, we hope this story gave you exactly the calm you needed tonight. If your eyes are still open, let them close now. Let your breath settle into something slow and even, matching that same patient, grateful rhythm one final time. There's nothing left to hold on to tonight, only rest, gentle and complete. Sleep well. Rest deeply. And remember, even the most complicated lives can find their way, eventually, toward genuine peace. Good night.